Amen. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you for the feedback you gave me last week. I was really chuffed with that. I wasn't sure how it would land, and I've had lots of lovely feedback about the first 3 chapters of the Bible that we looked at last week. We're in a 6-week series to look at all of the chapters in the Bible, the entire Bible, from the garden, because it begins in a garden, to the city, because it ends in a city. And the aim of this is to understand how the Bible fits together and for us to become more familiar with the Bible. Now, you are going to get the most out of this if you've got a physical paper Bible in front of you. That's why we're encouraging you to bring a Bible, and we have Bibles to give out. Now, if you haven't got a Bible, oh, look at you two. You're literally on the team and you're taking my props. Okay, if you haven't got a Bible, Fiona's you need one now. So please don't be embarrassed. I'm going to assume I've got a team who's about to spring into action. Who doesn't have their own Bible and would like a Bible? Pop your hand up. Okay, you've all got, yeah. Did we not give you one last week? Yeah, no, that's not the question. Who needs to borrow a Bible this week? There you go. Hand up if you need to borrow a Bible this week, and we'll get one to you. Okay? If you don't have a Bible, pick one up. It's yours. Write your name in it. Underline it. If you need to borrow a Bible, one of these, don't underline it. It's not yours. You have to give it back. Maggie's at the back, Katie. There we go. Anybody else want to borrow one? You get the most out of it if you've got a paper Bible. One down here. Kate, we're just making Katie run around a lot. Caitlin, were you not paying attention when we said it earlier? Oh, me as well. Caitlin down at the front here. There we go. Thank you. Good. Okay. Right, we'll get to it in a minute. I also got a little bit of criticism that we sent a text message out saying bring a Bible. The text message did not say, and bring a pen. I was on the basis you're all adults, but I'm just, you know, and you know who that comment's directed to. Right. What are your questions about the Bible? I really want you to become more confident in reading the Bible. So maybe you've got some difficult questions. There's a QR code going to go on the screen. We'll put this up at the end of the service as well. June, you got that QR code? June's finding the QR code. What do you find difficult about reading the Bible? What is it that's hard about reading the Bible? This will take you to something called Slido, and you can put a question in. There were a whole bunch of questions that people gave me last week, and I'm going to try and tackle some of them. I won't do them all in one week. I'll try and weave them in to my sermon as I go along. I've got another 4 weeks after today. They're kind of trying to find the QR code. If it doesn't go up now during my talk, it will be up after the talk at the end of the service. And do post your questions. I really want to know what it is you find hard about reading the Bible. Now, in your own Bibles, not the burgundy ones, in your own Bibles, underline things. Write things in. Write little notes in the margin. This is a living document. The words are sacred, but the object itself is not. Write in it. Make it yours. Write down what God might be saying to you as you read it. Underline key things so that you don't forget about it. Now, today we're going to go on a pretty fast-paced journey from Genesis chapter 4 through to the first part of 2 Samuel. And I'll talk you through all of that as we go. If you wanted to, you could kind of get to Genesis chapter 4 ready to go, but you've got plenty of time to do that. Let me try and do something I'll do each week, give you some Bible facts to help you better understand this incredible book that we have. Some of the oldest parts that we're going to be looking at today were written roughly 1,400 to 1,200 BC, before Jesus. So about 3,500 years ago. But they were also, I think this is really interesting, they were written more or less at the time. Sometimes when we think of historical documents, they were written a long time after the event. These weren't. They were written pretty much at the time. They were perhaps originally an oral tradition. They would speak about these things, but lots of them were written down at the time. And they were written for the people we're going to hear about today. They were written for Israel, God's chosen people. Don't think of the modern country of Israel. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the original people that God said, it's you. And we're going to hear a bit about them today. These earlier books in particular were written for them to help them as they were being formed into God's people. First 5 books of the Bible, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. These first 5 books of the Bible are also known as Torah, the Pentateuch. Penti means 5. The Torah, the law, is the basis of the Jewish holy book. Jesus would have known all of these words really, really well. Sometimes the Jewish holy text, we might refer to them as the law and the prophets. We're not going to get to the prophets today, mostly. We're going to stick mostly with what we might think of as the law. And last week I mentioned that in the Bible there are different styles of writing, different literary styles. They're not all the same thing. And if we try and read it the same way, we will get confused. It'll be really hard. Let me give you an example. So today, and much of what we're reading is story or narrative. It's telling us a sequence of events. We know what a story is. So a lot of it is a story, a narrative, a helpful explanation of events as they unfold. There is also law written in there. Now, I've got an example to show you. Jude, can you show me that first piece of law that we've got? There we go. Now, this is the Road Traffic Act, 1988. It's actually one part of it. It's chapter 52 of the Road Traffic Act. Now, the Road Traffic Act affects pretty much everybody, whether you drive or not. So this section is about driving offenses and dangerous. That's what this is about. So if you look at the language of how this is written, a person who causes the death of another person by driving a mechanical propelled vehicle dangerously on a road or other public place is guilty of an offense. A person who causes serious injury to another person by driving a mechanically propelled vehicle dangerously on another public road. It's not story, is it? It's not poetry, is it? It's a different kind of language, and it doesn't make sense to us. Sorry, just a second. It doesn't make sense. If we were trying to read this as story, it doesn't make sense. So this is law, and there are some books in the Bible that are law. We have to read them in a different way and try and understand them. And there's also covenant. Again, it's a similar kind of language. It's different to how we might tell a story. It's different to how we might write poetry. It's different again. Okay, thank you, June. We can go back to the title series for the slide. The other thing that we read, particularly in these first 5 books, is there's lots of repetition. Things get repeated over and over again. Now, what the Bible's not doing, it's not just telling, it's forming. So our modern instinct is, if we read something that we've read before, I've read it, I'll skip it. The biblical instinct, and this matters, is we read it again and we pay attention. If it's repeated, it's important. We have to pay attention to it. And the final fact today about as we read the Bible, it assumes community, not individuals. Often it uses the word you, which is used in the plural. You know, in Teesside, what's the plural of you in Teesside? Yous. No, what's the plural of you if you're from America? Y'all. You know, we had the Americans across a couple of weeks ago. They said, you really hit it right when you go, all y'all. You know, y'all, yeah, exactly. You, but yous. Often when we read you, it's yous, or y'all. It's plural. It's plural. And it's trying to help us live differently. How to be different, how to bless others, how to point to God. Okay, let me give you a really quick recap, and then we're going to plow in from Genesis chapter 4. So last week, God, in the beginning, God, was our memory verse, underlined it, very first words in the Bible. In the beginning, God. And he created human beings. And we didn't get into the science of that. He created human beings to live in perfect unity with him in this beautiful place called the garden. It was beautiful and wonderful. It was the way it was meant to be. This is really important to hold on to as we go through this 6 weeks. That's the way it's meant to be. God and human beings living perfectly together. What a beautiful, glorious, wonderful image of being in perfect unity with God. But then evil broke in, and the human beings decided that they would do something that wasn't of God. They broke the only rule God had given them. And they ate the apple, or they ate the fruit. We never know what fruit it is. They ate the fruit from the tree. because the serpent, the evil, had tempted them. And that's how it ends, with what we call the fall, this fracture that has now existed. Evil has made its way into this beautiful creation that God made. And so we had a question about this. Put the first question up, please, June. The question is this: Genesis appears to say that God created evil as well as good. If so, why did he create evil? Isn't God solely good? It's a great question, and a really understandable question. I mean, your mind does go there. My mind went there as well. Where did the serpent come from? Did God create it? Actually, the question is wrong. If it's your question, I'm not criticizing you. Your question is brilliant. Thank you. But the question is wrong because it doesn't. Genesis doesn't say that God created evil. In fact, it says the complete opposite. God created this and it was good. And in some places it was very good. Everything God created was good or was very good. He made a good world. But what Genesis tells us is evil broke into the world. As human beings chose to turn away from him, evil crept in. And why did the human beings choose to turn away from him? Because God had created things good. Because God is love, he gave the human beings free will. They weren't living under his oppressive regime. Like some of our brothers and sisters in Iran, for example, they weren't living under an oppressive regime. It was a beautiful, loving regime in which the human beings were free to make their own decisions. But what they chose to do was to turn their back on God and do their own thing. And so evil broke in, fractured creation, and that is the fall. Evil is not something God made. It's something that happens when we reject his good ways. But the rest of the story, from chapter 4 onwards, is that God doesn't leave it like this. He's got a solution. Spoiler, his name is Jesus. But we'll get there in the end. So, strap in as we go on a fast-paced journey through the first 300 or so pages of the Bible. I've thought of this a bit like a coach tour. We're going on a coach tour, all right? So we're going to go pretty fast because we've got a lot to do, but we'll stop occasionally, have a look out the windows, and every now and again we'll quickly get off the bus to have a closer look at things, but it will be quite quick. I'll be hurrying you back on the bus, and off we'll go again because we've got to get to our end in the next, good grief. We've got to hit communion by 11:30, so we've got 23 minutes. All right. This week, we're looking at tent. Garden last week, tent this week. Subtitle, God moves near to us. Okay. As we go through these pages, we're going to ask one question. How is God bringing his people back to live with him? That's the question that we're looking at. Okay, are you ready? Are you strapped in? Have you got your pen? Here we are. We're going to go really quickly. Okay, after Genesis 3, the human story is marked by exile. Adam and Eve are driven out of Eden, away from the beautiful place where God had walked with them, the way it had meant to be. The sin has now entered the world, and that sin goes with them. Genesis 4, you can flick through your Bibles as we go. Genesis 4, Adam and Eve's sons continue in this sin. Cain murders Abel. It's only the second generation. One of them is murdering the other one. Violence has now entered. By Genesis 6, the earth is described as corrupt and full of violence. God judges the world through the flood. And many of us know that story. Yet he sees hope in Noah and his family, and he saves them. Afterward, God makes a covenant with Noah, promising that he will not destroy the earth again in that way. But the deeper problem of sin remains. And this is going to be a recurring theme. Genesis 11, take a look at Genesis 11. Humanity gathers at this place called Babel, or we might want to think Babel. And they attempt to make a name for themselves. They try and be like God rather than honoring God, which sounds a lot like the fall in Eden. And so God scatters them, each now speaking their different languages. Babel. Sometimes if someone else is speaking a different language, it sounds like Babel. And so begins a new phase of God working his purposes out through one man. And we discover him in Genesis 12. We're going to quickly get off the bus. Look at Genesis 12, verses 1 to 3. The Lord said to Abram, now later his name changes to Abraham, but right now it's called Abram. The Lord said to Abram, go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. We need to hold that. The land I will show you comes a really major point as we go. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. This is a covenant that God is making with this one man. He promises a land, he promises to be a nation, and he promises that through that nation, all peoples on the world will be blessed. Now, this land is a real place where God will live with his people. And so from there on, we get back on the bus, quick, back on the bus. The story narrows to Abraham's family, Isaac, Jacob, and then Jacob's sons. Jacob has 12 sons. One of them is called Joseph. He's got quite a fancy coat. You may have heard of that fancy coat. Way, way back many centuries ago. Okay. Joseph ends up in Egypt. The family follow them to Egypt and saves them from a famine. And we get to the end of Genesis chapter 50, with the death of Joseph. But we're going to follow this thread through. We get to Exodus. Now, by the opening of Exodus, Abraham's descendants have become really numerous. But they're slaves of Pharaoh in Egypt. We covered a little bit of this just before Easter as we were looking at Moses. God hears their cries. So they're his people. Remember the promise he's made to them. He hears their cries. And the Bible tells us he remembers his covenant and raises up Moses. Let's pause and look out the windows. And let's talk about this word remembers. Because we read words in English in the Bible and we think we know what they mean. But actually they mean something a little bit different to how we are used to using them. Now, when I say remembers to you, I wonder if you're immediately thinking remembers, that kind of goes with forget. Like the Bibles, the burgundy Bibles this morning, I was meant to bring them in from home this morning, and they were in my hall ready to put in the car, and there was something on top of them. I took the thing off the top, put that in the kitchen, and then walked out the house and drove to church. I had forgotten the Bibles in the space of 2 minutes. It's an age thing, and I'm very grateful to Beth bringing them in. That's forgetting something. I forgot them, and then I remembered when I got here, and I asked Beth to bring them in. That makes sense. That's the use of the word remembers. Also, I buy flowers for Beth most weeks. Now, I'm not showing off, but also husbands. Just letting you know. And I do that because she's my wife. I am remembering she is my wife. I don't mean I go to the supermarket and think, oh my goodness, I'm married. I don't mean I've remembered. I've got a wife. I better buy her flowers. It's an act of remembering. It's sort of celebrating our marriage. I guess you could even think the same about birthdays or anniversaries. We're remembering. We're active in our remembering of things. It's not that we have forgotten them. We are actively remembering. But our English language doesn't have quite the same words. So remember last week I talked a bit about Old Testament written in Hebrew, New Testament written in Greek. We have to translate. And we're translating themes rather than just words. So we don't have a word in English that's quite the same as the way the Hebrew word, and we translate it as remembers. Does that make sense? Good. So God is actively remembering his covenant. He hasn't forgotten it. He's carrying it out. So back to Moses and back to Egypt. They go through the plagues. There are 10 plagues in Egypt. We get to this incredible moment that we'll come back to later called the Passover in Exodus 12. It's the final thing that God does because he wants his people set free. And he sends death on the land. And it passes over the Israelites because they're able to follow God's instructions. And he rescues his people. They go through the Red Sea. He takes them out. But the rescue is not the final goal. In Exodus 19, keep flicking through, Exodus 19, God says he's brought them to himself. And he enters into a covenant with his people. He gives them his law. And he shapes them as his people. Again, let's look out the windows a little bit at the law. The law was not just a set of rules. It was a way to live as God's people because surrounding them were detestable, vile, evil people. We're talking child sacrifices, worshipping other gods, so-called vile. They were vile. And God said, my people, you're different. You are different. And this is how you will be different. You're not going to do what they do. And so that has to be written down somewhere. So that's the law. It's how we are God's people, how they are God's people in that time. It's how they were to live with him. So at the heart of God's plan for his people, we get to Exodus. We're getting off the bus here. Exodus chapter 25, verse 8. Should we have a little look at that? Exodus chapter 25, verse 8. By the way, I did say last week, if you're new to looking through the Bible and you're slightly lost, please just prod the person next to you if they look like they know what they're doing and just ask them. We really want you to get to grips with the Bible. The first number is the chapter. The second number is the verse. And that's how we navigate through these words. Don't be shy. Prod the person next to you and just get them to show you or look at what they're looking at so you can try and find it. Exodus chapter 25, verse 8. This is God speaking. He says this. Then have them, that's the people, he's speaking to Moses, then have them make a sanctuary for me, and I will dwell among them. I will dwell among them. Think of our story and where we've been going. This is a crucial development. Human beings have been separated from God since Eden. I know for us it's only been a few chapters, but it's been generations. They've been separated from his presence since then. And now God chooses to live amongst his people. This is pretty profound. He then gives really detailed instructions. Exodus 25 to 31, keep flicking. They pick up, and as they give the instructions, there is Eden imagery in there. God is taking them back in some way to the perfection that was in the garden. Some of the imagery that goes into this tabernacle, the way it's designed, reflects some of that beauty of Eden. Also within the tabernacle, there's more sets of rules. There's a priesthood. There are sacrifices. And they show both the privilege of God being with them and the problem of sinful human beings being in the presence of a holy God. God is near, but his holiness means access is limited. The tabernacle is a gift. It reveals the relationship is not yet fully restored. Hold that phrase. Exodus 32, the golden calf incident. How do you cover this quickly? We got a serious problem. These people are like, hello? It's a serious problem. God has rescued them in the most incredible, profound way. He parted the Red Seas. Moses, who's led them, is on the top of Mount Sinai getting some instructions. What do the people do? They decide they're going to build another god. They make a golden calf so they can worship this other god. So even as God is drawing near and wanting to dwell with his people, they are turning away from him and worshiping something else. But Moses interceded and God renewed his covenant with mercy. Mercy is one of those words we use quite a lot in the Bible. It means not getting what you deserve. These people deserved something. They didn't get it because of God's kindness. And so the tabernacle is completed in Exodus chapter 40. The glory of the Lord fills it. Now at the center of the tabernacle was the ark. Seen Raiders of the Lost Ark? That's the ark, although that story's made up. The ark was a real thing, and the law was placed in the ark, and it was beautifully designed. And it was the most holy and significant place of the presence of God. And so, as we reach the end of Exodus, God truly is dwelling amongst his people. Do you want to see the tabernacle? Should we go on a little tour of it? Okay, we've got a little video. We're going to do about a minute and a half of this. Here we go. That's fine. Play it. Can you turn the music down? I want to talk over the top of it. Turn it down a bit more. Okay. So this is computer image, but it's based on the biblical sense. There's a fence around the tabernacle. Look at the beautiful colors. This was a special holy place, and it was mobile. It was a mobile sanctuary. It's a tent. Now, only the priest could enter this space right now. It was a time where sacrifices were used. The idea of sin went into the animal, and then your sins were forgiven. We'll pick that up a little bit later. So this was the courtyard surrounding the tabernacle. These items we're looking at are described in the Bible. And then we're going to go into the tabernacle itself. Look at the gold and the blue and the purple. Really high value. So very few people, I think maybe even only the priest could go in here, the one priest could go in here. So this was the holies. Look at the beautiful imagery, look at all the gold around it. Now God lived here in the tabernacle. Again, all of these objects are described in Exodus 25 onwards, and then as they built it, they're described again. Look at the beautiful imagery. And now we're going to go into the Holy of Holies. Lined in gold. The most holy place. And there's the Ark of the Covenant that God made with his people. Perfectly described. The imagery on it reflecting Eden. Look at those angels, they're called cherubim. The wings outstretched. And they're all in the Bible. You can go and have a look at that. I think what we'll do is we'll play this video in full at the end and you can watch it a bit more, but we're going to move on from now. Back on the bus, everybody. Thanks, June. You want to stop that video? Back on the bus. Let's pick the tour up at Leviticus. We'll go a bit quicker now. Leviticus. Remember I said about law? And I gave you an example of the law. Leviticus is mostly law. It explains how Israel, God's people, is to live with a holy God in their midst. It describes the sacrificial system, the purity laws, the other rituals and special days that will all provide a way for sin to be dealt with so that God's presence can remain with his people. Leviticus is really quick. We're going to flick over it. Get to Numbers. Flick through the Bible, get to Numbers. Numbers is one of the most accurately named books in the Bible. If you've read Numbers, there are quite a lot of them in Numbers. And I've had a question about Numbers, I'll pick it up. Let me just tell you, Numbers shows the tabernacle at the center of Israel's camp. They're in the wilderness here. They're on a journey to the promised land that would only have taken a short period of time. But because Israel couldn't get its act in gear, God keeps them there for 40 years. In fact, the people that left Egypt, they all died. It was their children that moved into the promised land because of their wickedness. And yet God still stays with his people. Such is our God. He is good all of the time. Thank you. Okay. Numbers. Here's a question. Can you put that up? There's a second question, I think, for us, June. Numbers. This is the question. 2 questions. Numbers and names. I pass them. So when you're reading the Bible, you get all these numbers and names. I just pass over them. Some of the words or names are hard to pronounce. Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. And so let me give you a top tip. If a name is hard to pronounce, just go for it. Chances are no one else knows how to pronounce it either. Particularly if you're reading out loud. Although if you are reading out loud, ask someone who you think knows. And what they should do is just speak confidently, and then you'll be all right. The numbers are strange to us, aren't they? But if you understand what the book of Numbers was about, it was almost like, it's a bit like reading a book of accounts or a register or a census. As we read it, it's a bit kind of weird. It doesn't flow because we're trying to read it perhaps as story or poetry, and it isn't. It's a different set of words and scriptural style. They're broken up. It's not like all of Numbers is just Numbers. There are elements of story in there as well. So I get it, that if you're reading it, you might skip over it. I think, honestly, most of the time, it's kind of okay. Just kind of recognize what you're skipping over. But it's not all rubbish. The Bible tells us itself that all scripture is useful for teaching and rebuking and instructing in righteousness. Okay, Numbers. We're not going to spend any more time in Numbers. Go to Deuteronomy. We're going to be quick in Deuteronomy as well. So next book of the Bible, flick through. Keep going. You get to Deuteronomy. I'm going to assume you're there. Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy renews again the covenant with God's people, prepares the people to enter the land promised to Abraham. So most of them have died. It's their children that are going to go into the land. It's Moses' last sermon series. If you read Deuteronomy, it's Moses' last sermon series. It repeats some of the stuff we've had before. But remember, when it repeats in the Bible, it's because it's good. We need to listen and pay attention to it. That's Deuteronomy. Get to Joshua. We haven't got off the bus here. Joshua. There we go. So the story perhaps hasn't moved very much. When they left Egypt, they've sort of been in the wilderness. The story physically moves on. And God brings his people to this land, the land he promised Abram back in Genesis. He's brought them there, and he's fulfilling this promise. Now, if you've read Joshua, and in fact, if you've read the bits up till now, there are quite a few horrific and bloody incidents taking place. There are battles, and at times it jars. With the God we know in Jesus, it jars. Jesus said, love your enemies. We read God saying, obliterate your enemies. What is going on here? And it was one of the questions that was asked. I think I might have the question for you. How do we balance some of the extreme activities God does in the Old Testament to his people, and I would say through his people, with the loving God I'm taught about in church? It's a great question. And it's hard. So here's my answer. What we read, particularly in this part of the Old Testament, were for a particular people at a particular time. God was judging these nations and their evil practices, but not because Israel was better, but because they came under God's judgment, and he used Israel to enact his judgment. And the language that we read is a kind of battle language of the time. We read things like, they destroyed everything that breathed. But when you read on, you see that some of the groups that are supposed to have been destroyed are appearing again. It's a style of writing, a kind of type of exaggeration or hyperbole, the word is. It made sense at the time. It's just a little bit different to our modern ears. But judgment remains a key concept for us. In the New Testament, through Jesus, judgment remains, but it's reframed in a different way. In these Old Testament books, Israel fights physical battles. In the New Testament, the battle is far more spiritual. And we are called to love our enemies. But the big point of this is the authority of final judgment remains and has always remained with God. Taking the land that he promised, driving out these detestable people, shows that God takes evil seriously. But the cross shows us how far he is willing to go to deal with it. And so, after the period of conquest, we're going to go to Joshua 18. The land is wrested and divided amongst the 12 tribes, the 12 sons of Jacob. And then we get to this point. We're on tents this week. So look at Joshua 18, verse 1. The whole assembly of the Israelites gathered at Shiloh and set up the tent of meeting there. God is not just traveling with his people. He's now dwelling among them in the place he has given them. After Joshua comes the book of Judges, and Israel repeatedly turns away from God. Sound familiar? I mean, this will be a repetition right through. The people turn away from God. That's what Judges is all about. Just at the end of Judges, we get this beautiful little 4-chapter book called Ruth. In the middle of all this chaos that's going on, God is quietly at work in this little book, telling the story of an ordinary family. But it shows that when everything feels broken, God is still working out his purposes. In my Bible, it's just 2 pages. And then we're about to land. We come to Samuel. Samuel has a number at the front. Most of the books of the Bible have numbers at the back, but Samuel has numbers at the front. 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel simply means when it was originally written on a scroll, the scroll was too big to put it onto one scroll. And so they split the scroll in 2. So you have 1 scroll, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel. They're the same book, but it's just you couldn't fit them onto one scroll. And it's just been passed down that we have them written as 2 books. So by the time of Samuel, the tabernacle is still functioning at Shiloh. We just read that in Joshua. But spiritual decline in the land is evident. Even amongst the priests, there is spiritual decline. The ark, that most holy, holy presence, is stolen in 1 Samuel chapter 4. And it marks this low point. It symbolizes the loss of God's favor. In fact, Israel has just been thinking of it as a kind of lucky charm. And the whole system has got messed up. And there becomes this misunderstanding of God's presence with his people. But still, God continues to work amongst his people. So we come to 2 Samuel, chapter 7, verses 1 and 2. We're just going to get off the bus for the last time. 2 Samuel, chapter 7, verse 1. Actually, just looking at the first part of verse 2. King David says this. Here I am living in a house of cedar while the ark of God remains in a tent. David says, why are we worshiping God in a tent? I live in a house. Why is he living in a tent? And this marks the end of the tent phase of God's presence with his people. From next week, we move to a temple. I'm out of time. My service leader's given me 3 minutes. Should we do some hyperlinks? Should I do 2 quick hyperlinks? Okay. Hyperlinks. As the Bible connects to each other. We've read Exodus 25:8. I will dwell amongst my people with the tabernacle. Go to John in the New Testament. Go to John chapter 1. I'll do 2 here in John chapter 1. So God says, I will dwell with my people. I'll build a tent, I will dwell with my people. John chapter 1, verse 14. The Word became flesh. That's Jesus. God became flesh. What did he do? He made his dwelling among us. That's always been God's plan, to be with us and for us to be together. He did it in a tent in the desert. He did it face to face with Jesus. And whilst we're still in John chapter 1, in Exodus chapter 12, the Passover, the angel of the Lord, the one that brought death to Egypt, passed over the Israelites because they had sacrificed, they'd slaughtered a lamb. And they'd marked their homes with the blood of the lambs. That language sounds familiar. Look at what it says in John chapter 1, verse 29. The next day, John the Baptist saw Jesus coming towards him and said, look, the Lamb of God, the one who would be sacrificed so that the judgment of God would pass over us, that we would be set free, that we would be free to live in the beautiful presence of God. Sometimes these books in the Bible can be hard to read and relate to modern life. And my invitation to you is, as I finish, my invitation to you is, how do we respond to these first 5 or 6 books of the Bible? Do we go and build a tent? That is not what we're doing. What we do is we look at what this says about God, what this says about people. And it says that God loves his people and wants to be close to them. It says his people constantly reject him. So what do we do about that? What we do about that is to reorientate ourselves to God's presence with us. And as we read these words, we allow God to come close to us. That's what he wants. That's what he's always wanted. And then next week, we'll pick this up and look at the building of the temple and what that says about God. Shall I pray or shall I just get off because we're going into communion? Get off.